Hi guys, I'm Ruth. This story is about my mother-in-law Sandra, who is a proud and entitled woman. Her daughter Megan was a kind of mini version of her, but not as vile. Meanwhile, Larry, my father-in-law, is an awesome in-law. I'm not mentioning my parents' names because they don't have a big part in this story. Sandra and Megan never liked me because they thought I was too plain and boring for my husband Neil. They had such an aversion to me that they never tried to get to know me. Since I lived in a separate city from them, I had no idea how bad they were. I always said to Neil, "I wish I stayed in your hometown, Neil. If we lived in the same city, I would have had a better relationship with your mom and sister."
I don't think so, Ruth. Look, you find good in everyone, so you think they'd be great people as well. They're not good people, Ruth. My mom and sister are super vain. They like to flash money and don't like people who don't.
It's okay if someone has a luxurious lifestyle, Neil. What's the problem with that? I'm sure they are good people at heart. No, guys, they were definitely not good people at all. I was so used to seeing Neil and Larry act so warm and kindly towards everyone that I underestimated how horrible Sandra and Megan could be. I didn't have the opportunity to have them meddle in my wedding because we eloped. Now I'm glad we did because I can totally see them making a mess of my wedding by insulting and berating me. After getting married, I moved in with Neil to his city. I thought that it would give me an opportunity to get closer to his family. I was sad to leave my parents but excited for a new beginning. But all my excitement vanished in one single day. On that day, I was invited by Sandra to dine at an upscale restaurant in the city. I happily got dressed and we went and met them. But as soon as they saw me, they made the most disgusted faces. Sandra said,
"God, you could have dressed a little better.
"Ruth, look at my lovely daughter here. She knows how to choose the right clothes to match her status." "Mom, you know your daughter is skilled like this, right? Not everyone can be such a fashion expert like me. It takes a lot of talent and cash to dress like me." "You're right, Megan. You do have good taste in clothes. I admire your style, to be honest. I like to dress a little plainly, and I'm not very good at being high fashion. It goes over my head." Suddenly, Sandra and Megan both started to laugh at me. They were so loud that people were looking. I was slightly embarrassed and confused by their actions. It wasn't like I was dressed very shabbily. It was just that I had a simple dress with a small bag and no makeup. I hate makeup, so I didn't wear it. Meanwhile, Megan and Sandra were dressed in designer stuff and had lots of makeup on. I couldn't understand why it was such a big problem I wasn't dressed like them. I mean, I often went to good restaurants with my parents who also dressed humbly, and Neil never had a problem with this either. In fact, he liked to dress casually too. When I was scrambling my head to find a reason for their laughter, they said, "Oh God, Ruth, you are really funny. You know you have no sense of fashion. Poor people usually don't because they can't afford designer stuff. That's why they look and dress so shabby. It's so easy to pick out the poor ones just by their clothes, right, Megan?" "Of course, Mom. People with money always dress well and go to expensive places. You have to have enough money to invest in things like cars, clothes, and houses."
"Right. I can see why Ruth drives an old car and dresses like this. She has to pinch money after all. Why do you think she is marrying Neil?"
"That's not a very nice thing to say, Sandra. I'm marrying Neil for love and nothing else. Everyone doesn't need to splurge on material stuff just because they have money. I'm fine with my current lifestyle."
"It's not like you to have any other option, right? Maybe marrying Neil will help you out with that. Megan here doesn't ever have to worry about price tags, so she spends money on everything, but you don't have that option, of course."
I genuinely felt humiliated by the entire conversation. Sandra and Megan had a way of making people feel inferior to them. They liked to flash their money and show everyone how well off they were. That has always been relevant to their attitude. However, I didn't expect them to treat their own family like shit. I mean, I agree that they stay in a separate city and don't know me that well, but seriously though? Who demeans their daughter-in-law like that? Well, my mother-in-law does, and so does my sister-in-law. It was funny to see them do so. They didn't have any personal income and relied on Larry to provide for them. Still, they think that they are better than everyone else. The entire lunch they made fun of me by continuously mentioning how I must be so poor and how I married Neil for money. They kept laughing with each other and didn't even include me in their conversations. By the end of the lunch, I was thoroughly humiliated and wanted to just go home. I was starting to understand why Neil didn't like his family as much. I quickly went home and found Neil waiting for me. He took one look at my face and said,
"What's wrong, Ruth? I take it that lunch with my mom didn't go very well."
No, Neil, the lunch didn't go well at all. They kept humiliating me all the time. They said some really rude things.
Seriously, Ruth? What did they say? God, they couldn't even behave in front of their own family. I thought they would have at least been decent enough with you.
They treated me like shit, Neil. Now I see why you wanted to stay away from them. They are really prejudiced people, Neil. They kept making fun of my clothes and called me poor. Sandra kept comparing me to Megan and how she was such a diva.
God, Mom hasn't changed one bit, I see. You know, Dad is really getting sick of her entitled and horrible behavior. We tried so hard not to make them become such vain people, but they wouldn't listen.
Sandra and Megan are really vile people, Neil. I don't know how you turned out to be such a great man. I didn't see them insulting you for having a normal lifestyle, but they had a lot of things to say to me. You know, they even called me a gold digger. They think I'm so poor that I trapped and married you for money.
That's horrible, Ruth, trust me. They wouldn't have the guts to call you a gold digger in front of me. They had you alone today and took advantage of it. It's funny that they kept calling you poor. They will be very surprised when they finally meet your family. What do you say, Ruth? Do you want to get some revenge?
What do you have in mind, Neil?
Your parents have never visited my house here, Ruth. We can call them over and have my parents over as well. Dad would be super happy, plus my mom and sisters will have a nice lesson. What do you say?
Hearing Neil's plan really got me a little excited. I'm not a petty person, but God, Megan and Sandra pushed my buttons today. People shouldn't be making fun of others no matter what economic class they belong to. These two didn't even have the basic decency to show some people respect. I wanted to teach them a lesson and change their attitude. Megan was young and influenced by her mother, so I could understand her behavior. But Sandra was a grown-up woman who should have known better. I knew she came from a very humble background, so I didn't know why she decided to turn into such a horrible woman. I expected better from her. Anyways, now that our plan was set, there was no going back. Neil and I called my parents and explained the situation. They agreed to come over and shock my in-laws a bit. Larry wouldn't be shocked for a reason, but Sandra and Megan sure would. The day my parents were supposed to arrive, I called his mom to tell her about the invitation. I said, "Hey, Sandra, so my parents will be in the city for a week. They're flying down today. I was hoping you, Megan, and Larry would join us for dinner tonight. We already informed Larry and he will be at the house straight from work. So we can expect you and Megan as well, right?" "Oh God, it's been less than a month since you got married to my son. Don't tell me your parents are already here to start mooching off of us. We're busy people, Ruth, unlike your parents, rich like us, have prior commitments. We would have to cancel our nail appointment for this." "I was hoping you would come, Sandra. I really wanted you to meet them, and so does Neil. My parents don't plan on coming here frequently, so they may not be over again anytime soon." "Yes, I get it, Ruth. Flight tickets are expensive for people. Anyways, since Larry is already confirmed with you, we will be there. We have an image to uphold, so we will come. Don't expect us to be all warm and welcoming, though. It's not our thing. We have trouble socializing with people who don't belong to our status." "That won't be a problem at all, Sandra. My parents can mix with everything without a problem. They won't mind at all. Just come over and join us for dinner. That will be enough." After a lot of huffing and puffing, Sandra agreed to join us. She would bring Megan as well because she didn't have anything better to do. Neil was there when I called Sandra and he heard the entire conversation. He was pretty pissed at the way Sandra talked to me. I had a hard time calming him down. Neil almost went to Sandra to yell at her for disrespecting me and my parents, but that would spoil our plans of embarrassing them. So I didn't let him do that. We simply had to wait for a few hours. Neil and I were having an amazing time with my parents who arrived in the afternoon. We were having an animated conversation when Sandra and Megan walked in. They took one look at my parents and made a very weird face at them. My parents were, of course, kind and greeted them with a smile. After the pleasantries were exchanged, Sandra and Megan became very rude. They talked among themselves and didn't even try to include us in their conversations. Neil was fuming while my parents and I ignored them. When Larry arrived, Neil got up to get the door. Sandra took the opportunity to show off her status a little. She said, "So it must be fun to have your daughter marry into such a rich family. I must say, you taught your daughter very well. She caught a good one."
"We didn't have to teach her much, Sandra. She's a natural at what she does. I must say, she did choose well. Neil is a great man."
"And he comes with a great bank account. You must be very new to this way of life. I can tell from Ruth because she shows all the signs of being a poor dumb girl. Now if you look at my beautiful daughter here, you will see how people like us dress and talk. You know that bag alone cost $12,000. Just as Sandra was busy explaining how luxurious her lifestyle was, Neil and Larry walked into the house. Larry took one look at my parents and said,
"Hi, boss. I had no idea you would be here today. Neil, Ruth, you should have told me. This is a big surprise. What brought you here, boss?" "Oh, we just wanted to come and see Neil's hometown. Ruth has been pestering us about visiting. We also remembered that it's been a long time since we have visited this branch of the company, so we flew down here for a short stay." "This is great news, boss. I wouldn't let you get back anytime soon, though. We have a lot of catching up to do."
Sandra and Megan went completely silent hearing this exchange. Their mouths were hanging open and they didn't know what to say. I guess they were having a hard time understanding why Larry was calling my parents boss. You see, my father owns a big company and Larry works in one of its branches. Larry was in a very high position, so he earned a good salary. However, my dad's net worth was way more than his. Sandra had no idea about this, so she said, "Larry, why are you calling him boss? They are just Ruth's parents. I don't understand." "Yes, they are Ruth's parents, Sandra, and he is my boss. He owns the company I work at. I simply work at one of its branches, but he owns the entire business. I guess I forgot to mention this to you." "You need to stop calling me boss. It's weird having my daughters-in-laws call me boss. You can just call me by my name when we are alone. That is, if your wife agrees to it. She seems to think that we don't belong to the same status." Sandra looked extremely embarrassed, and Megan, who was also refusing to meet anyone's eyes. Larry looked confused at first, but then realized what must have happened. He knew his wife after all. He didn't make a scene then and there. Instead, we all had a good time together. Sandra was now busy trying to get my parents' attention. They made some light jokes about status and money, which shut her up real quick. Megan looked pretty uncomfortable and stayed quiet the entire time. After my parents left for their hotel, Larry turned on Sandra in front of us. He said, "Tell me what you did say to my boss, Sandra. Don't try to hide it. I can tell you said something really stupid." "Mom also insulted Ruth, Dad. It wasn't just her parents. Mom had been acting all high and mighty because of her flashy lifestyle." "Oh my God, Ruth, is this true?" Yes, Sandra seemed to think that I am a poor dumb girl. She actually said it in front of my parents. They have done this before when we went out to lunch. It seems like Sandra has a problem with me dressing down and not being fashionable. She wanted me to be like her daughter. Megan made some comments, but I can let them go because she is just parroting her mom.
"What the hell, Sandra? What is this I am hearing? I have told you countless times not to be like this. How dare you insult Ruth and her parents like that?"
Sandra looked really scared and started to cry. She could tell that Larry was very angry at her. She turned on the waterworks out of fear, and in the hopes that Larry would soften a little, she said, "I'm sorry, Larry. Ruth could have told me about her status. I would have treated her a little better then. She intentionally hid this from me to make me look bad." "It doesn't matter if I'm rich, Sandra. Even if I was poor, you shouldn't have talked to me like that. Being respectful towards people is basic decency. You didn't even uphold that."
"I can't believe that you still think you are superior to everyone, Sandra. Me and Neil tried so hard to make you understand that money isn't everything, but you never listened. Mom, I am highly disappointed in you and Megan. I didn't expect you to act like this to your own daughter-in-law. I think we will need some time away from you. I need to protect my wife. This also means that Megan will no longer have access to my credit card. She needs to learn a little as well."
I agree, Neil. I don't want to be around Sandra right now. It's best if we take a break. Sandra and Megan panicked when Neil talked about going long contact. They both had a habit of pestering him for money. Neil didn't mind because he wanted his family to have what they wanted, but after seeing how entitled and vain they were becoming, he decided to take a step back. That alarmed Sandra and Megan, but it was about to get worse. Larry said,
"That is a great decision, Neil. I'm just sad that I can't do the same too, but there is something I can do. I will be limiting Sandra's access to my credit cards. I have allowed her to spend money as she wished, but it's turned her into a horrible human being. Since Megan has turned 18, she will be cut off from my credit cards too."
No, Larry. What are you saying? You can't do this to us. We made a small mistake, but you can't punish us so harshly, for it is not fair. Dad, don't do this, please. I need money. If you cancel my credit cards, how will I get my necessities? Even Neil is saying that he won't give me money.
"Megan, you can get a job, and then use your own money to flash your wealth. I won't be your cash cow any longer. You are old enough to get a job. Since you don't want to go to college, this is the only way for you. As for you, Sandra, from today, I will handle the finances and only give you a small allowance.
You don't deserve any more than that." Sandra and Megan started to scream and cry when Larry said this. They couldn't believe that their own behavior would make them face some harsh consequences. Larry wasn't even listening to them. He was extremely embarrassed by his wife's behavior and worried about what my parents and I thought of him. He kept apologizing for Sandra's behavior and even asked for forgiveness. I assured him that we didn't hold him accountable at all. Since dinner was over, Larry left with the sulking Sandra and Megan in tow. The next day, Neil and I found out that Larry stuck to his word. He started managing the house finances and was pissed about all the unnecessary luxury expenses he found. Most of them were shoes and bags purchased by Sandra and Megan. He was so furious that he even took Megan's car away. Thankfully, Megan understood the severity of her actions and started to look for jobs. She didn't want to end up dependent on someone like her mom was. Sandra was in deep trouble now. Larry wasn't talking to her properly and pushing for therapy. Neil and I also weren't taking her calls or letting her visit. She sent me some apologetic texts, which I ignored. I must say that it was fun to have her demeanor change and see her get a good life lesson.